The tape is now recording. Wait, hold on just a second. Let it start.
You got it on?
Yeah, hold on just a second.
First thing in the morning, whenever I got up, I went out to get the paper. And what woke me up was this noise of the bombs, but I thought it was dynamite. And then after I got out to get the paper and it was out, I thought, they're not dynamiting today, it's Sunday. It's got to be something. So I rushed back in, turned the radio on, and the minister was praying. And then the radio announcer, he interrupted the church service to say that the island was being attacked, but they didn't know by who yet. And then he come right back and said they'd been identified as Japanese because they had the rising sun on the planes. And he said, to get wherever you live, if you're awake, go and wake up everybody you know. If they're servicemen or people, civilians that work out at the bases or Hickam Field or any of the army places, wake them up and tell them to go to their post. So I went and I was waking up everybody in the court where we lived, and the Navy men come out of there putting their clothes on as they went out to get out there. And there was only one civilian that lived in there, and I went back the second time to tell him, and he says, I'm not taking a chance on losing my life going to Pearl Harbor today. So he didn't go out. He didn't go out at all. So all the Navy wives then was irritable with him because their husbands went and he stayed. Not mine, because he was at Vallejo at the time. And we were outside on the street. We had been told to stay in the house, but we were outside watching to see what was going on. Naturally, we were curious. And a plane come by so low that when he banked, we could see the Japanese men laughing at us as he went over. And then there was two of our planes chasing him. They were right after him, but they were up higher than he was. And then just as he got past us, we heard a bomb, and it was a shrapnel bomb that he dropped, and it was near the funeral home. We didn't know if it was planned to be dropped there or if he was just trying to get rid of his load as he was getting away. And there was one woman killed with that bomb, and she was outside. If she'd have been in the house, she would have been killed.
Did you know her?
No, I didn't know her, but we lived in half a block of where it was. And later then, we were out. Well, that was, I don't know if that was later that day or the next day, but we saw them bring a truckload of sailors, bloody sailors' bodies into that funeral home.
Are you okay? Yeah, are you okay?
There was 4 different people that lived out at Hickam Field and Pearl Harbor that was coming into town to get away from those places. And as they come in, if they thought of somebody they knew, they would stop. And so there was 4 that come to my house. I lived in a studio apartment with 1 bed. And that night there was 5 grown-ups stayed in that apartment and 1 baby. And we thought we had got everything where we'd know where it was before it got dark, but we hadn't. And you had to even unscrew the light bulb in your refrigerator, because if you flashed the light, then you might get it shot out, because the sensors, it was out. And there wasn't supposed to be any lights showing anywhere. You couldn't even leave white clothes on the sheets on the clothesline at night, because they expected more planes to come in there, and that would tell them where they were. And we lived on the street, and then back of us was an alley, and mostly Japanese lived back there. So one night, we saw the Japanese, we could see their lights they didn't have the shades pulled down for enough, we could see lights. Well, we just thought that they should be reported, and myself and Dolly Gross said, well, we were going and report it. Well, we started out, and it was so dark you couldn't see your hand in front of you, and I got scared, and I went back. She said, well, I'm going and report it if I get shot. So she went on, and how she got there, I don't know. She said she kind of felt her way and knew, and turned the corner. When she got down to the next corner, there was two sentries there, and they heard her coming, and they waited till she got right close to them, and one of them threw a flashlight in her face, and the other one, she said, had a gun with a bayonet on it, wasn't that far from her throat. And it said, stop, who goes there? And so she told them what she was doing. She was hunting somebody to tell them about that light. Well, they come back with her to my house, and we went on the back porch and showed them the light. They wanted to stand there and shoot it out. But I told them, no, you can't do that, because I live here, and I'm going to have to live here right on, and I don't want to do anything to make those people mad with me. And I said, they may be honest people, Japanese people that's even more afraid than we are, because they're afraid of us and their own people too. So I wouldn't let him shoot it out. He went around, he had to go around, there was a big fence between us and them. He had to go around the block and come back, and he went and told them, and we never saw their lights on again. But one block down from us, they caught people during the raid that had, Japanese people, they had radios and maps and was directing the planes of certain targets to hit. And they caught them doing that. And another thing was, there was a milk truck went in just before the raid started. And it went into Pearl Harbor. And once they heard the bombs, the sentries at the gate said, you know, a milk truck come in here and it's Sunday, they shouldn't be in here. And we'd let them pass. So they sent two sentries out to that, and they found them. They had radios in this milk truck, and they were contacting the planes and telling them where things were, strategic places to hit. At Hickam Field and Pearl Harbor and all those places. And then a friend of ours, she had gone down to, her husband was on one of the boats, and she went down to pick him up. And she saw him on one of the small boats coming over, but when the bombs started falling and bullets everywhere around, her car, she said, wouldn't start. So somebody else come on. She jumped in the car with them. She had left her little boy at home. He was 11 years old, though. When she got home, he was gone. He had gone with somebody else. She never knew whether her husband ever got to the dock or not. She couldn't find her child when she got home. But the child was smart enough to, a couple of days later, he announced on the radio and told her who he was with and where he was staying. And her husband, of course, did make it to the dock all right and was safe. But she didn't know for 2 days whether he was safe or not, and she didn't know for 2 days where her husband was. And there was a bomb found at the YMCA, too. And a lot of these bombs and places was dropped at certain places where they thought there would be crowds having a party or something. And the Japanese had entertained some Navy officers the night before. And that was, you know, more or less to keep them from being aware of anything or being there at the time. And then they kept telling us that they might be troops to back up, to come to invade the island and take it over. And if they had had enough troop ships out there to have backed up those planes, they could have took that island real easy at that time, because everything was just chaos. And they didn't realize the damage that they could do, or they would have had troop ships there to back them up. But we didn't know what they had them, so they told us to be prepared to go to the woods in case they invaded the island. So I had loaded my car up with groceries. I went to the grocery store. Everybody was buying up groceries. because we didn't know whether ships would be able to come in there and bring food or not. So I had all kinds of canned goods, crackers and things in the back of my car, blankets, 2 jugs of water, and everything ready in case we had to go up into the hills, we call it. One was, they said, up around Diamond Head or the Palace, someplace like that would be a good place to go. And then when it was 2 days later that they let us go down and send telegrams home. And I just wired and told them that I was safe, and we still had plenty of food to eat on the island. And the folks at home never had even thought about whether we'd be short of food, so then they started worrying then about whether we would have enough food. Which I shouldn't have mentioned it, I guess. And one of the girls that lived there in the court with us, she was Hawaiian, Japanese Hawaiian, but she was married to a Navy man. So she went down to send a telegram to his people, and she told him to tell somebody at Black Mountain. All she knew was Black Mountain North, and so they asked her what did Black Mountain mean. They thought it was a code. She was sending a code somewhere. She was scared. They had a gun on her. She was scared to death. She said she couldn't think of North Carolina to save her life. She had never been to the States. So she said all I could do was sit there and say Black Mountain. Black Mountain. But finally she got through to them that it was her husband's people at Black Mountain, and they kind of finally come up with North Carolina, and she told them yes. It was Black Mountain, North Carolina. They were these that she was writing to was supposed to let the ones in Black Mountain, North Carolina know.
Yeah.
Everything was all right.
So did they, like right after the raid, did they say, be prepared for another one right after it?
What?
Did they warn you about having another one immediately right after that one?
A raid?
Within the next 2 or 3 days?
Oh, yes. That's why everything was a blackout. That was December the 7th, and we left there, I did, women and children, and we got to San Francisco New Year's Day. And at the time we left, and for months later, everything was completely blackout. But that first night when we had this blackout, we forgot to eat before it got dark. So we had put one of the mattresses down on the floor and had left the box springs up there. Some were sleeping on the box springs, some on the mattress, some on a quilt. And we were going to be very careful. We was eating bread and butter and jelly and thought, well, we're being careful. Next morning we had to wash everything. There was jelly and butter on everything. So the next night we learned to eat before it got dark, because even though I had put blankets up over the windows, we still was afraid to turn the light on. And finally we used the radio, but we had a blue piece of paper on the glass part of the radio so it didn't put out any light at all, and that it wouldn't show through if there was a crack or something showing, because we didn't. And one of our friends got up early in the morning, and he had a flashlight looking for his clothes. He didn't realize that they could see it, and a sentry from outside shot the flashlight out of his hand. Another man was running to get his hat, and they hollered halt. He didn't hear them, and they shot. They didn't hit him, but they shot, and that scared him, and he froze when they did shoot. But there was a lot of them that was really trigger happy. A lot of young soldiers that was just ready to shoot at anything that moved then. So you had to be real careful what you did.
When you got back to the United States, how did people react to you when they knew that you were in Pearl Harbor?
Everybody wanted an interview. Everybody wanted to talk to you, and especially when we got to San Francisco. The last thing they warned us when we got on the boat, don't talk, don't say anything about whether there's food shortage or anything. And a lot of the things that they told us not to say anything about or tell that it happened there, or whether the submarines got in or whether they didn't, they already, the newspaper knew more about it than we did, and yet we had been warned not to talk. And there was 5 babies born on the ship that I come back on.
Oh.
and we were surrounded by destroyers. And I don't know, I think there's a couple of submarines too.
Mm-hmm.
And one night we had a scare that they thought there was enemy submarine in the area. So everybody kind of got upset then, but there really wasn't. It turned out to be it was one of ours, and they hadn't been recognized until they thought it was a Japanese, but it turned out to be one of our submarines that was helping to escort the ships back.
How many?
The first ones that they brought out of there was the wounded, and then they started bringing women and children out.
Mm-hmm.
And whenever I went to sign up to leave there, because Clifton was back in Vallejo at the time, when I went to sign up to leave, they said you could only get 2 suitcases on the boat. I said, well, what about cars? They said, well, we don't plan to take any cars. And then one of the men come up and says, well, just in case we do, you can go ahead and fill out this paper. So I filled out a paper to bring my car back. I also got 5 suitcases and a great big packing trunk down on that dock, and they put them all on the boat. Some women come on there with 2 suitcases and children and didn't have enough clothes for them because they thought that's all they could get on the boat.
Did everyone share and pretty much
Yeah,
everything?
I had baby clothes, diapers and everything from our first baby that was born dead.
Mm-hmm.
So I went down and got the person to let somebody go down in what they call the hole and open up my trunk, and I got all those baby clothes out and give them to these people that didn't have enough things for their babies.
Yeah, that's good.
And there were so many seasick people on there, you just had to walk around the seasickness. But I never did get seasick. I never have been seasick.
How many ships left Pearl Harbor with people on them? About.
That was in this convoy that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
There was 3.
Mm.
3, I believe it was the Lurleen, the Mariposa, and the Monterey.
Which one were you on?
I was on the Lurleen. And we were really well protected, though. We had planes. When we left Honolulu, we had airplane escorts so far out. When we got near San Francisco, we had airplanes to meet us. And all the way over, we had destroyers on the outside perimeter of the ships that we were on.
Mm-hmm.
They were well protected.
Yeah. How many people in all do you think evacuated the island?
Oh, I don't have any idea, but there was around 500 women and children on this boat.
Yeah.
And still it was kind of a hodgepodge. And the people that were run the boat, what they did was bring women and children over and take troops back. They said they would rather transport 1,000 troops than 500 women and children. Because there was, they were easier to handle. The women was always wanting something. They wanted fresh water to do laundry with. They wanted fresh water to do their hair with. And the only fresh water we had was for drinking. We supposed that they had to save water in case these ships, something would hold them up and they couldn't get in. They couldn't waste water. So she wasn't a close friend, but she was an acquaintance. Her husband was on the same submarine that Clifton was on, and she had twins. And she was in a room by herself with 4 beds. And I was in the room with a Marine's wife that she was on the bunk above me, and she got seasick before we ever left the dock. She didn't go out to vomit. She vomited over. The lavatory was right close to me. It splattered on me, and I got out of there. I couldn't sleep. So she asked then if they would let me be in the room with her. She wanted me in the room with her, so if we had to abandon ship, that I would take care of one of the babies, and she'd take care of the other. And if she got lost with one of them, she had the address, kept it pinned on to the one that she was going to let me take, so I would know who to take it to when I got to the States.
Yeah.
So people thought ahead of time about in case something happened, and I thought that was pretty smart of her
Instead of trying to
have
carry
the address pinned on the baby and everything, so I would know where to take it if something happened to her.
Yeah. Do you have any, were there any little anecdotes that were, that you could tell?
Any anecdotes, you mean anything that was fun? There wasn't too much fun.
Well, not
at
fun,
that
but
time.
maybe something that was kind of, I don't know, interesting about that time, or...
Well, the one thing that was kind of funny was one night we would listen to radio calls on the radio, and they'd say, somebody's breaking in, nobody here but women, send the police. And then the police would call back and say, call, I don't remember what they called it then, but anyway, they had answered the call, and it was a cat doing something, and it was a false alarm every time, so forth. So then one night, we heard a noise outside our door, sounded just like somebody trying to get in the door. And here was 5 women. One had a big old 45 in her hand. One of us had an ice pick, others had a butcher knife, any weapon we could get. And the girl with the gun, she pulled the door open quick and had the gun ready to shoot. And it was a cat licking a milk bottle. Dang it, kept hitting and sounded just like somebody still continually trying to get in the door. And they said, well, if we'd have called the police, that would have been a false alarm. Cat licking a milk bottle. Wouldn't we have been embarrassed? Now, that was one of the funny jokes that happened to us.
Yeah.
Was boy, everybody with their weapons drawn and pull an old cat licking a milk bottle. Oh, and the girl that had this 45 was when she come out of Pearl Harbor. You wasn't supposed to have any firearms or anything then. But she didn't want to leave hers at the house. When she come out of there, she was sitting on the gun, and she had an oatmeal box full of bullets sitting there, but she had put a diaper on top of that to look like diapers stuffed down in the big old oatmeal box. And she said when she stopped, the sentry asked her if she had any firearms. She told him no, but she did. She had this 45 and all of those. But she says, I was sitting there shaking, thought he was going to tell me to get out so he could search the car. But he didn't. He told me to go on. And so we had one gun in the whole crowd, all of us. But Dolly Gross was the bravest of all 5 of us. She was the one that went to get the sentry, and she didn't seem to be afraid of anything.
I bet she was.
Well, I guess she was, but she...
Didn't show it.
And she is the one, whenever I went down to get on the boat, I was waiting in line to get on the boat, and she come running down and said, there was a sailor from the base come to notify you that if you get your car down here and get it in line with within the next 2 hours, they were taking 10 cars, and you were the second person to fill out papers to bring one. So if you get your car down here, they'll take it. So I had gone and stored the car at a Japanese place where they stored, and they had charged me $50 a month just to store the car, and I had to pay 6 months in advance, which was $300. So I arrived, she come in a taxi. So I got in the taxi with her. She had him wait till she could come and find me and went back, and I paid the taxi driver for taking me to the place to get my car. I paid him for bringing her down there and taking her back to let me know. And I got the car down there, and I got the car, the trunk, and 5 suitcases on that boat. And we had bought a refrigerator, and when the landlord come and he knew that I was leaving, he come and I tried to ask him if he wanted to buy the refrigerator, and we hadn't had it but about 6 months, because most everybody else in there had ice boxes, but
Yeah.
we had bought a new refrigerator. And he said he'd give me $5 for it. I said, well, you're just crazy. He said, well, you'll just have to leave it here, and I'll have it for nothing. You can't take it with you. I said, well, before I'll give it to you for $5, I'll take it outside and chop it up with an axe. Because he was part Japanese, too. So he went on out thinking I would have to leave it there. But this same girl that come and told me to get the car down there, which was Dolly, I, she didn't get to go on the boat at that time, so I left the refrigerator with her. And I hadn't been home but about 6 weeks before I was notified that the refrigerator had arrived, and they shipped it. The Navy did, shipped it later. And after I got home, I sold it for $100. Then later on, I had to pay $200 for an old model that was much older than one I sold for $100, just to get one, because you couldn't get a refrigerator then after Clifton come back from the service. We bought one of these old refrigerators with the coils on top. But it kept things cold, and it was better than nothing, but I was regretted selling mine at that time, although I didn't need it at that time. But that was one of the times that the man worried about the wife instead of her worrying about him, because Clifton was in Vallejo and I was there. But then we were just there 10 days with him in Vallejo before his ship was sent back over there, his submarine. And we had a kind of a signal that the day he left, he couldn't call me on the phone and tell me the submarine was leaving, because you couldn't say anything like that on the phone. He just called me up and he said, head for Georgia. And I knew then that they were leaving. Yeah. And Lorraine Thomas, we were both in the same hotel. And she was going to leave at the same time. She was told to head for Texas. And I tried to get her to ride with me. I could take her right to her house. It wouldn't cost her a dime. No way would she ride with me. Her and Jimmy took the train. Later on, she was just about the best friend we ever had, and we still go and visit her. And she told me later that she was afraid of my driving. Why she wouldn't ride with us. And she says, yeah, you are. I've drove across country several times and everywhere else and never had a wreck. And I was afraid to ride with you. But she was afraid to ride with Tommy, her own husband. But Tommy was he wasn't a fast driver, but he was kind of a careless, reckless driver. And I thought, well, I can see he'd be afraid to ride with him, but I think I was a little more careful than he was. So she says, here, you made it all the way to Georgia, and me sitting up on that train, paid for Jimmy and me both, and I could have gone home for nothing. And one of the girls that borrowed some money from the Red Cross, I just like the Red Cross, for some of the things they did. They, by the time she got home, they had 2 threatening letters that they were going to notify her husband's commanding officer if she didn't pay that money back. And the letters was there when she got there. That's the way they were. And then when Uncle Pepper, which was my brother, he was over in Germany, and he paid 50 cents for a donut from the Red Cross. He paid 50 cents for donut and coffee. And we always thought that, well, you donate to the Red Cross, these men get it for free, but they didn't. They paid for it. Yeah. And when he left, I give him a baby shoe, because supposedly if somebody's going on a long trip, if you keep one shoe and let them take one, they'll always come back, because of the baby shoes got to have them made. So he took that baby shoe with him, and even whenever they went into these concentration camps and everywhere, he said he always had that shoe in his pocket. And when he went to Paris to sightseeing, he lost the shoe. And he went back, and a week later he went back and backtracked himself and found the baby shoe, because he said that's how dirty the streets was in Paris. They didn't sweep the streets like they do in the States or keep them clean. But he backtracked himself and found that shoe, and he brought it back, and just last year, it was Sally's baby shoes. I was going to give them to Sally, but Janet, Leoma's baby daughter, she wanted one of the shoes, because she wanted one that he took over there. So I asked Sally if it was all right. She said, yes, give Janet one of them. Give her the one that he took overseas. So I give Janet the one that he took with him and brought back, and I give Sally, the other one, because they were her baby shoes that I was keeping.
Who did you stay with when you got back to Georgia?
But
Who did you stay with when you got back to Georgia? Just
I
family?
stayed at Mama's some and at Clifton's mother's some, and I got me a job in Albany, so I stayed at his mother's whenever I got me a job there. And then I got a job in the fuse plant at Macon. I felt better working to send bullets over to fight the Japanese with bullets, bombs, or anything else that we can make.
So you worked in a
So
factory?
I worked in the fuse plant in Macon, and that's where I was working when Clifton got back to the States. He'd come to Macon and come to the plant that night to get me. I was really shocked whenever I saw him. But where we worked, you was taught to, we worked with a lot of powder, and it's apt to blow up or start a fire. And if you ever twisted these shells, it would cause a friction. You were supposed to put them on like that, but never twist them. So one night, somebody twisted one, and it started a fire, and the fire was just, there was powder all along because you were filling shells with powder. So the fire was just working its way up to me, and I didn't move. And there was another girl that didn't move. So the foreman of that part, he come and got me and led me out. And I felt like I had weights on my feet. I could hardly drag it. And when it was over with, they was talking about how brave me and her were sitting there and everything on fire. He said, brave nothing. He said, that damn fool is not going to work in here anymore. Talking about the other woman. He said, she's been trained to get up and go out slowly, not to panic and run, but to walk out. And so she sat there, and he said, no, she wasn't scared. She didn't have sense enough to be scared. He said, Miss Moody was white as cotton, and I realized she couldn't move. So I got her out. And he never would let me go back in there where there was powder anymore. He said he realized that I wouldn't be able to move if something happened. So I worked out front on a stamping machine from then on. I never did work back where they filled in powder, the detonators and things like that. Detonators was what we were working on because they're the most explosive things there is. It wasn't the shells, but detonators for the big bombs.
And then after you all got into Macon, you moved down to Key West and had...
No, we didn't go to Key West from Macon. From Macon we went to New London, Connecticut. New London. His submarine had been sent back there to teach men on submarines. It was used as a school ship, teaching other men. So we were in New London, and from New London he was sent to Philadelphia. We went to Philadelphia. Then from Philadelphia back to New London. Then from New London he went to Warrant Officer School in Washington, D.C. And the war was still on then. And when the VJ Day was with Japan, was first there was victory in Europe, I believe. And then when it was victory in VJ, we got, Gary was about, I guess he was about 10 months old then. And we went downtown to see what the crowd, what was going on there on VJ Day. It was a riot in Washington, D.C. We got down there and we couldn't get out of the traffic. And Clifton kind of panicked when he couldn't. He always panics when he gets stuck in traffic. So we put in to make a left turn, and the policeman was pushing him, waving him back. You can't make a left turn. He went on, made the left turn anyway, and kind of pushed the policeman out of the way. And we got back and got out of the crowd. And as we went out, there was a Marine woman and man was out on near the flagpole. They were drinking. They decided they'd change clothes. We never did see them strip, but they had started to. He was going to wear her uniform and she was going to wear his. But that was just the biggest riot I've ever been in, and the hardest one to get out of. And Gary I had took a bottle along with him because I was afraid we'd get stuck in traffic and couldn't get out. And Gary would suck his bottle, and then he'd look at what was going on and be waving everybody. And the others would be drinking whiskey, and they'd say, "That's right, boy, drink it and have a good time," something like that. But everybody was wild at VJ Day.
Oh.
And then from Washington, D.C., he was sent to Guam, and we went back to Georgia. And Gary and I did. And then he told us that, told me I could come to Guam or stay in Georgia. If I went to Guam, it would be kind of communal living. We'd have our own room, but we'd have to eat in a dining room with everybody else. We'd have to share one big bath and all, and there was nothing much that was private there. You lived in big barracks like men did almost. And so I said, well, I'd rather be in Guam in a tent with him than back in the States in a mansion without him. So we was headed, Gary and I were to go to Guam. And I was in San Diego and got a letter and told me to come to Honolulu. He'd been transferred back to Honolulu. So when I got on the ship, I just had to go to Honolulu and never did go to Guam, which I was glad. And then we'd lived in Honolulu 13 months.
When you went back to Honolulu, did it bring back some old feelings
A
about?
lot of, but it was hard to find a place to live in.
Yeah.
First, we found a place. There was 4 couples of us lived in a big old beach house on the beach out at Sunset Beach, which was a beautiful place and all. And most of us got along. There was one woman that never got along with anybody, but they finally got out and got them a place. Then the Navy turned over several Quonset huts to people that wanted to fix them up to live in. So all 4 of us that was living there went and got 4 Quonset huts kind of the same era. We all had to paint them and fix them up. Clifton took some metal out of the base where they had something that he could work with. He made a double sink, put it in. We had about one big room for a bathroom and about 2 or 4 toilets and 2 showers in it because it had been used for men and barracks. And then we painted it. Clifton painted everything in the kitchen white and with wood trim. And Gary, somehow, I was busy. He got a hold of the can of red paint, and he went in and painted all the toilet seats red. Then come in and proceeded to paint over the white kitchen cabinets, the fronts of them red. When I found out all that red, I said, your daddy will murder you when you get here. I just know he will. As hard as we worked to paint and to fix up this place. So when Clifton come in, he said, well, give him a paintbrush and let him mess it up. Let the next person comes in work as hard as I did fixing it up because we're getting transferred to Key West.
Oh.
So that's all it saved Gary that time. Boy, he had really done him up a paint job.
And then when you went back to Key West, you had Mom?
Then we come back to Key West. That was, of course, after everything was over there. And from Key West to Norfolk, from Norfolk to Williamsburg, from Williamsburg to Winter Park, he retired. From Winter Park to Gainesville, and here we are.
Yeah. Well, I think that's about it, don't you? Unless you can think of something else.
I'll tell you how many different places we lived. We lived in Panama, from Panama to California, and from California to Hawaii, from Hawaii back to Georgia, because that was when the war was. And from there, then, when Clifton come back again, we was in New London. We lived there. Then from New London, we lived in Connecticut, in Philadelphia. Then back to New London, and then from New London to Washington, D.C., from Washington, D.C. back to Hawaii, from Hawaii to Key West to Norfolk to Williamsburg, and Williamsburg to Winter Park, and Winter Park here. So that's how many different places we live.
Jeez.
Besides living 2 different places, and most of them places I forgot. we'd take the first thing we could get when we got there and live there till we could find something better,
Yeah.
more suitable or something. Then we'd move again.
So,
I cleaned up a lot of dirty apartments.
probably pretty good at it.
When we got rented the one in Honolulu that I told you about, the man offered me $5 for the refrigerator. Clifton sanded and varnished and refinished the furniture. It looked so bad. Every piece of furniture in there. Then he painted the front, little front porch and the banister, the walk and everything. He painted that. He painted the door facings. The landlord come in to collect the rents. He said, I'm going to have to raise your rent $10. This is the best looking apartment back here. So Clifton said right then he would never paint up and fix up anybody else's place. If he went to the trouble of paint and fix one, it would be his own.
Yeah.
So when we left Key West, we had Navy House in there. When we left Key West and went to Norfolk, we bought a house. We bought a house in Williamsburg. We bought a house in Winter Park, so we started buying our own places there. But we reported this man to the Navy, and they would not let him raise our rent.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of places would get blackballed by the Navy, and they told him either to not raise the rent or be blackballed. So he had a choice then of not raising the rent or not being able to rent to any more Navy people. And when the Navy people did what they called blackball the landlord, they would tell their people anywhere on the base or ships or anywhere, you do not rent from this person. So
Yeah. That's
that's
basically
what
all.
we didn't have to pay that extra $10 rent that he said he was going to raise our rent.
That's it.
The day that I saw the truckload of sailors come into the funeral home, I was so angry. I felt like if you give me a Japanese baby, I could pull his head off and throw him in the garbage bin. But I know I couldn't have the kid to give me more. But I felt like at that time that I could do that. That was how angry I was.
Mm-hmm. I can understand that. You would be angry. So you were really quite close to the bombs that were dropped.
Oh, yeah. Well, there was one fellow quite of a rock where we were sitting out and watching, and the plane was coming down so low we could see the Japanese laughing at us.
That's what you said.
He had goggles on and was just grinning as he, looked over like that and we could see it. He was just barely missing the house top.
That's well.
Boy, did we, when we got over and we heard this bomb, did we get in the house and we didn't have to be told to stay in anymore. They had little Boy Scouts out on the street telling us to go in. And of course we ignored the little Boy Scouts because we felt like we were older and bigger than they were. But that was what they were put out there for, was to keep people off the streets. They wanted to keep the streets clear because they had a lot of people, servicemen coming and going from different places. Oh, and we all went down to give blood because they wanted blood. And there was great big healthy looking Hawaiian man right in front of me. When they went to put the needle in there, they tested your blood before they took it. When they went to get a sample of his blood, he passed out, so they didn't get any blood from him. When I went in, they kept putting the needle in there, and my vein would collapse, and they'd have to take it out and put it in another. And the next day, my arm was black and blue, both of them, where they had tried to get blood. And then I went to get shots. We were all supposed to go get shots for anything that might, the water might be contaminated or something like that. So we went down to get shots, and the doctor saw my arms. He said, "What happened to you?" And I told him that was try to give a pint of blood. That's what happened. He said, "Don't ever give blood again unless it's life or death." I said, well, it was life or death. This time there were people dying for the need of blood. And they did. They were just begging for anybody that could give blood to come down and give blood because they needed blood in all the hospitals. Until we went and we helped grow bandages at the Red Cross place.
So the Red Cross really helped out a lot during the whole.
In some ways they did. The Red Cross themselves, everything was volunteers that was done. I think the Red Cross had too many people that benefited from the money more than the people did that got it.
Yeah.
It's what I felt like. And if it was a small thing, the Red Cross don't help. It has to be a big disaster for the Red Cross to come in and do anything. I think the Salvation Army does more good any day. I'd rather give to them than the Red Cross.
Yeah. Is there anything else you can think of?
A lot of people, maybe I shouldn't say that, but that's the way I feel about the Red Cross.
Yeah, I can understand that now.
I think I feel different now when they have a blackout somewhere than the people that never went through one.
Yeah.
Really. You know, anybody that's been through that has a different feeling than a practice blackout than somebody else that doesn't. Because we knew what the blackout was for. When we went to the movies there, we went in the afternoon and we got home before dark, or we didn't go. Now, some people might have gone at night. They might not have been afraid to come back and walk on you. But you couldn't have a flashlight to see where you're going, where the curb was, or anything. You had to walk slow and kind of feel your way. And this girl, believe it or not, she went out there, went down the street, and found her